Ever wondered how Russia became the largest country on Earth? It's a wild ride, full of epic heroes, terrifying villains, and game-changing revolutions. Let's dive into this massive story, shall we? Our story begins over 1,000 years ago with the East Slavic tribes. Imagine dense forests and winding rivers. Suddenly, a group of Viking traders and warriors called the Varangians, or the Rus, row down these rivers. According to legend, a Viking chief named Rurik was invited to rule in 862, and just like that, the first Russian state, Kievan Rus, was born. Centered in modern-day Kiev, this kingdom was a bustling hub. In 988, Prince Vladimir the Great made a huge decision. He shopped around for a new religion and chose Orthodox Christianity from Byzantium. This wasn't just about faith. It tied Russes to the rich culture of the Eastern Roman Empire, giving them a new alphabet, art, and a powerful sense of identity. But Kievan Rus's was a loose collection of principalities, and brotherly love was in short supply. They were constantly fighting each other, which left them dangerously exposed. Then, in the 13th century, a storm from the east changed everything. The Mongol Golden Horde, led by Batu Khan, a grandson of Genghis Khan, thundered across the plains. Between 1237 and 1240, they utterly destroyed Kievan Rus. Cities were razed, and the once proud princes became vassals, forced to pay tribute to the Mongol Khans. This period is known as the Mongol Yoke, and it lasted for nearly 250 years. While it was a time of devastation, it also had some unexpected consequences. It cut Russia off from the European Renaissance, but also forced the scattered Russian principalities to unite against a common enemy. A new center of power began to emerge from the shadows, a small, overlooked town called Moscow. Moscow's princes were clever. They played the long game, cooperating with the Mongols while secretly building their own power. Ivan I, nicknamed Moneybags for his skill at collecting tribute for the horde, made Moscow the spiritual center of Russia by convincing the head of the church to move there. Fast forward to 1480, when Ivan III, also known as Ivan the Great, stood his ground against the Mongols at the Ugra River. No big battle happened. The Mongols just went home. The yoke was broken. Ivan the Great then tripled the size of Muscovy, started calling himself Tsar, and laid the foundations for a centralized Russian state. His grandson, Ivan IV, would take that to a whole new level. We all know him as Ivan the Terrible. Crowned the first official Tsar of Russia in 1547, his reign was a mix of brilliant reforms and horrifying paranoia. He conquered vast territories like Kazan and Astrakhan, opening the way to Siberia. But after his wife's death, he unleashed the Oprichnina, a reign of terror carried out by his black-clad secret police who rode on black horses, creating a climate of fear that gripped the entire nation. When Ivan died, he left a weakened country and no clear heir, plunging Russia into the time of troubles. It was a chaotic free-for-all of famine, civil war, and foreign invasion. Poland even occupied Moscow for a while. Finally, in 1613, a national assembly elected a new Tsar, a young nobleman named Michael Romanov, starting a dynasty that would rule Russia for the next 300 years. The early Romanovs focused on restoring order, but Russia was still seen as a backward, isolated country by the rest of Europe. That all changed when a giant of a man came to the throne in 1682, Peter the Great. Peter was obsessed with modernizing Russia. He traveled across Europe in disguise, learning everything from shipbuilding to dentistry. He came back and forced his nobles to shave their beards, adopt Western dress, and build a powerful, modern army and navy. He fought a long war with Sweden and won, gaining access to the Baltic Sea. There, on a swamp, he built a magnificent new capital, St. Petersburg, his window to Europe. Peter's reforms were brutal and costly, but they transformed Russia into a major European power. Following Peter, a series of rulers came and went, but the next truly monumental figure was Catherine the Great, a German princess who seized the throne from her own husband. Catherine was a brilliant and ambitious ruler. She was an enlightened despot, corresponding with philosophers like Voltaire while also dramatically expanding the Russian Empire. She won wars against the Ottoman Empire, annexing Crimea and securing the Black Sea coast. She also participated in the partitions of Poland, adding huge territories to Russia's western flank. This was a golden age for the Russian nobility, a time of art, literature, and grand palaces. But for the vast majority of the population, the serfs, life was still one of brutal hardship. The 19th century saw Russia reach the peak of its power, but also face growing internal turmoil. After defeating Napoleon's invasion in 1812, Russia was seen as the savior of Europe. But the ideas of liberty and revolution were spreading. The Decembrist revolt in 1825 by army officers demanding a constitution was crushed, but the desire for change didn't die. Thinkers and writers like Pushkin, Dostoevsky, and Tolstoy created some of the world's greatest literature, grappling with the soul of Russia. The biggest turning point came in 1861, when Tsar Alexander II, the Tsar liberator, emancipated the serfs. It was a massive social reform, but it didn't solve the underlying problems. By the early 20th century, with rapid industrialization creating a new, discontented working class, Russia was a powder keg waiting for a spark. That spark came in 1917. Exhausted by World War I, facing food shortages and chaos, the Russian people rose up. In February, Tsar Nicholas II abdicated, ending the Romanov dynasty. A provisional government took over, but it was weak. In October, a small but determined group of Bolsheviks, led by the brilliant revolutionary Vladimir Lenin, seized power in a nearly bloodless coup. What followed was anything but bloodless. A brutal civil war erupted between Lenin's Red Army and the anti-Bolshevik White Forces. The Bolsheviks won, and in 1922, they officially created the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR, the world's first communist state. After Lenin's death in 1924, a power struggle ended with Joseph Stalin in complete control. Stalin launched a ruthless campaign to transform the Soviet Union from a peasant society into an industrial superpower. His 5-year plans built factories and cities at a staggering human cost. He forced peasants onto collective farms, leading to a famine that killed millions. He also unleashed the Great Terror, a period of unimaginable paranoia where millions were arrested, sent to Gulag labor camps, or executed. Then came World War II. The Nazi invasion in 1941 was devastating, but the Soviet Union, at the cost of over 25 million lives, managed to push back the German army all the way to Berlin. The victory made the USSR a global superpower, but it left the country scarred and exhausted. After Stalin's death in 1953, Nikita Khrushchev took over and denounced Stalin's crimes, leading to a period known as the Thaw. But the fundamental nature of the Soviet system didn't change. The USSR was now locked in a global ideological and military struggle with the United States, the Cold War. This era saw the space race, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and a massive arms buildup. After Khrushchev, Leonid Brezhnev's long rule was known as the era of stagnation. The economy faltered, and dissent was crushed. By the 1980s, the Soviet system was creaking under its own weight. In 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev came to power. He tried to reform the system with his policies of glasnost, or openness, and perestroika, or restructuring. But it was too little, too late. The reforms unleashed forces he couldn't control. Communist regimes across Eastern Europe collapsed in 1989. Then, in August 1991, hardline communists attempted a coup to overthrow Gorbachev. It failed, but it fatally weakened the central government. One by one, the Soviet republics declared independence. On Christmas Day 1991, Gorbachev resigned, and the Soviet Union officially ceased to exist. The 1990s were a turbulent time for the new Russian Federation under its first president, Boris Yeltsin. The transition to a market economy was chaotic, leading to hyperinflation and the rise of a new class of super-rich oligarchs. A sense of national humiliation was widespread. On New Year's Eve 1999, Yeltsin unexpectedly resigned, handing power to his prime minister, a former KGB officer named Vladimir Putin. Putin promised to restore order, stability, and Russia's place in the world. Over the next 2 decades, he centralized power, reasserted state control over the economy and media, and pursued a more assertive foreign policy, culminating in the annexation of Crimea in 2014 and the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And that brings us to today. Russia's long and dramatic history echoes through its present. From the legacy of a strong, centralized state to a deep-seated suspicion of the West, the past is never far away. This incredible journey, from a few scattered tribes to a vast empire and a global superpower, is a story of resilience, tragedy, and relentless ambition. Thanks for watching this whirlwind tour of Russian history. If you found this fascinating, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that shaped our world. See you next time.